Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Wix e-commerce event. Today, we're going to be speaking to you about how Brexit will impact cross-border e-commerce sellers. So welcome as we wait for everybody to join us in the audience today. Please feel free to share your website links in the chat, drop them there, let us know exactly where you're coming from. We have our team joining us today to answer all of your questions in the chat. So feel free to ask anything that you need there. Both the Wix team as well as our panelists teams will be available with you today in the chat to answer your questions. We will be recording today's session and it will be available for you afterwards, so don't worry. You'll be able to watch the session again. We will be sending out an email with the video to everyone who registered. And you can also just go to the Wix e-commerce school and the recording will be available for you there. So for those of you who are not familiar with Wix e-commerce, we are an e-commerce solution. Whether you're an entrepreneur starting an online business, a retailer moving your store online, or an e-commerce brand already selling millions of dollars online, the Wix e-commerce solution enables you to launch, manage, and scale your e-commerce business successfully. We have over 180 million users worldwide, 5 million premium users, and over 500,000 active stores selling around the world. So today we're going to be talking about Brexit and how that is impacting e-commerce. So essentially, Brexit is the withdrawal of the United Kingdom from the European Union that will officially take place at the beginning of next year. One of the major changes for e-commerce businesses, and that is when the UK leaves the EU and customs union, single market, and VAT regime. And that's happening on the 1st of January, 2021. And although not directly related to Brexit, we also can't ignore the UK's new e-commerce reforms also coming on the 1st of January, 2021. So all of these changes will impact cross-border e-commerce merchants around the world, but particularly British companies selling globally, British companies already selling in Europe, and foreign brands currently selling in the UK and across the EU. So businesses both in the UK and abroad will need to prepare their e-commerce operations for a post-Brexit world, especially with regards to these new regulations and customs. So today we're going to be speaking with 3 leading e-commerce industry experts in the UK about these coming changes. They'll share their insights about Brexit and its impact on international e-commerce sellers. And they'll talk about the new regulations, customs requirements, and just what exactly Brexit will mean for cross-border e-commerce throughout Europe. So I'm going to ask them to please introduce themselves. Richard, let's start with you.
Thank you, Liat. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. Hope you're keeping safe and well wherever you are. I'm Richard Asquith. I'm the VP of Global Indirect Tax at Avalara, and I've spent a fruitful and enriched life studying VAT rules so that you don't have to. However, for a brief period, I'm afraid you're going to have to learn a bit about what's going on because it's going to be affecting e-commerce in phenomenal ways, whether it's customs, whether it's VAT, all the things you're going to have to worry about to keep your goods moving and minimize tax. So my job at Avalara is I spend a lot of time working with our technology people who create wonderful products that help calculate those taxes, manage the import VAT, and keep you VAT registered wherever that may be. So delighted to join you today.
Thank you, Richard. And I can say that most of us have never been this delighted to talk to a tax person before. So we're super excited.
It's mutual.
Kunle, over to you, please.
Hi there, I'm Kunle Campbell. I am the host of 2X e-commerce, and I pretty much run a community of e-commerce, retailers across the world and marketers. I'm an advisor to a few ambitious e-commerce businesses. I'm based in the UK, but yeah, my community is global.
Thank you. And our cherry on top, Neil.
Never been called a cherry on top before, so thank you very much. Hi, my name is Neil Cushel. I am the CEO for Globally. We are a technology company who work with e-commerce online retailers. We build into an e-commerce platform and we provide localization services. So if you're a brand who sells cross-border, then by working with Globally, we provide currencies, payment methods, duties and tax calculations shipping, returns, fraud management, etc., so that you have a fully localized experience for your consumer wherever they are in the world. We work with 500 brands around the world, including Marks and Spencer's, Versace, Hugo Boss. And so I can talk to you a little bit today about what those 500 brands are doing, particularly from a consumer experience point of view, in a potential WTO post-Brexit world.
Excellent, thank you. So I think we're just going to dive right into it. And let's start with the biggest question on every e-commerce business's mind these days, and that is the impact on international e-commerce. So Kunle, I'll start with you. How do you foresee Brexit affecting online retailers in the UK and the EU?
Okay, so I'll start out with, the fact that, obviously the EU is, one trading bloc, with a common legal framework. And with the UK leaving, it's going to become 27 countries. I think e-commerce businesses and online retailers should really think about it in three ways. It's going to affect three key parts of their businesses. One is how they sell to customers, essentially, in the EU. If you're a UK business, and how EU business is selling to the UK, will just change the way they sell from a taxation standpoint and many other areas. The other is the supply chain and warehousing, essentially, looking really at the end-to-end supply chain, identifying products and services that geographically have interactions in the EU. And the third really is the operation. So, whether it's staffing, the legal taxation framework, and regulations in general. So if you sort of have a mini task force to sort of take on these three aspects, I think essentially you'd be well covered.
Thank you. Yeah. So Neil, I mean, you're obviously working with a lot of big brands. How are you seeing these implications?
I think there's a lot of confusion, and people are, many brands are still unclear exactly how it works. So I think if we think about what Richard's going to talk us through, first thing, you've got to understand what the implications of the tax, what they are, both inbound and outbound, for returns, for VAT reclamation on returns, for all kinds of things. So first is understanding how the taxes will apply. Then secondly, it's working out what you're going to do with your consumer experience. What are you going to do? Are you going to build those additional costs and duties and taxes into the product price? Are you going to pass them on to the consumer? What is the way that you're going to try to smooth that journey for the consumers as much as you possibly can? Because there are going to be additional costs as it stands at the moment. It may all change if a last minute deal gets done, but as it stands today, there will be additional costs, and it's how you're going to manage those. And so we can talk a little bit about that later.
Great. Yeah, I think that, you definitely need to be prepared. Businesses need to have the plan A, the plan B, the plan C. We'll hope for the best, but be prepared for everything. So, Richard, I think we will hit you now with the hard questions that are really top of mind for most of the businesses at the moment. And that is how Brexit impacts sellers in terms of VAT.
Yeah, so when the UK leaves the VAT regime on the 31st of December, it also leaves the customs union as well. We always tell people to prepare for three big changes. Just before I come to that, on the customs side, it's declarations. So about 250,000 UK businesses will have to complete customs declarations for the first time. And nobody knows exactly on the EU side, but we think it's about 200,000 businesses. Then there'll be the second question is tariffs. We don't know. That's dependent on the ongoing negotiations. I'm not sure if we'll get a moment to come back to this, but one thing we've noticed is whatever the outcome of a free trade agreement, most e-commerce will be subject to tariffs, despite what you're hearing about a no tariff deal. Now, getting to your main question, VAT. So the UK is out of the EU VAT regime from 2021, the start of it. Now, what does that mean for e-commerce sellers? Now, a bit like customs, a new tax legislative curtain, if you like, comes down over the English Channel between the UK and the EU. So any goods moving between those now, the rules change. A lot of the simplifications, a lot of the reasons or justifications for not getting VAT registered in Europe or in the UK, whilst the UK was still in the EU VAT regime, disappear. So basically the message is you're probably facing more VAT registrations if you want to continue selling either from the UK into the EU. And we're seeing that's hitting a lot, particularly smaller e-commerce businesses who suddenly for the first time will no longer be able to sell under their UK VAT registration. So they lose what's called the distance selling thresholds. So they'll have to get VAT registered in a lot of extra countries immediately or continue selling. And what's really been surprising, I think, for the past few days, because everyone's going into hyperdrive now on Brexit. You know, the reality is here. We've been distracted somewhat by COVID, but we're seeing even the largest brands are actually deciding to cancel on a few countries, the smaller countries, particularly in Central and Eastern Europe, because of the loss of these types of simplifications. So that's on the distance selling. The other big change with the VAT registration rules is around sellers on e-commerce platforms, because they're insisting that you, the seller, take care of the VAT, take care of the new customs obligations, whether it's declarations, whether it's paying the tariffs, before you can start to sell on the platform. And that goes both ways. Always think about Brexit as affecting both sides of the English channel. So if you're an EU seller into the UK, it affects you too. And if you're a UK seller into the EU, then you've got a problem there. And what the marketplace is, just very briefly, what the marketplaces are insisting on, from Amazon and eBay all the way downwards increasingly, is that the sellers must get the goods over the English channel and into a third-party warehouse. So that means you've got to take care of all those declarations, all of the VAT. I think the good news is you've still got a bit of time before you get into serious trouble. Even if you do miss some of the deadlines around the 1st of January, there certainly will be some leniency by the tax authorities. We're seeing HMRCs being very, very positive. On the other side of the English Channel, they seem to be a bit more strict. So a lot to think about, but don't panic. I think that's the message I would put out there. It's 4 or 5 simple things that you can be doing now to keep your goods moving and keep the imports, VAT and tariffs minimized.
So I think on the don't panic, I think that's so important, Richard. And I'll just say to everyone watching today that we will be sharing best practices on how you can get prepared. We'll be giving you the checklist of all the things that you need to run through, all of Richard's advice here and the things that you need to run through. So I think the idea is be prepared, understand what's coming, and we'll try and help as much as we can on this end. But Richard, while we're talking about all these changes, could you also maybe explain a little bit about the new e-commerce reforms, which are coming about the same time?
Yeah. So it's curious that in the UK, our tax authorities here, HMRC, they seem to think that we had nothing to do on the 1st of January, and they seem to have forgotten about Brexit, because they've also loaded onto the e-commerce sector a new set of rules around e-commerce goods and shipments in and out of the UK. And we call this the e-commerce package. The EU has a similar package, very, very similar, which they've delayed until the 1st of July, largely because of COVID. They thought it was too much to impose this. But the UK is going ahead. Now, there's 3 things to remember about the e-commerce package. What's changing? Number one, if you've been selling to UK consumers, so whether you're a UK seller or an overseas seller, so from the EU, from China, from the US, it doesn't matter, you'll have been able to sell to any UK consumer. And if the value of the sale, the consignment, is £15 or under, then you've been able to send that through VAT-free. The goods just pass straight through UK customs. That relief got abused heavily, so the UK is closing it. It's called a low-value consignment relief. Now, instead, and this is where it gets tricky, and it's a bit of a surprise because people have barely understood Brexit, and they certainly haven't understood the e-commerce package. But the second piece of reforms is for sellers, again, UK or overseas sellers. If you're selling goods which are being imported into the UK directly to your consumer, and the value of your consignment does not exceed £135. So that's the new magic number to keep in your head, £135. Then you can't rely on paying the import VAT, the UK import VAT at customs anymore. Either whether you're taking care of it as a seller, as a nice customer experience, which I know Neil would talk a lot about, or whether you just want to leave it to your UK consumer to pay. Instead, you're going to have to charge UK VAT in the checkout. Again, this is an area that Neil and his team will be heavily involved in. You're going to have to charge it. You're going to have to be UK VAT registered. You're going to have to make quarterly declarations into HMRC. That's not a problem for UK sellers, obviously, because they're almost certainly already VAT registered. But where we see it's going to catch out a lot of EU, Chinese, US sellers is they're unaware that they have to be UK VAT registered now. So from the 1st of January. So, that's just a few weeks away. Now, we see a lot of reforms in VAT, and the question we always get asked is, yeah, very interesting, really, but am I going to get caught? Now, you are on these ones. Two things are going to happen to make this an absolute brick wall. Number one is your goods will almost certainly get stopped by UK customs, because they will see if you haven't correctly charged UK VAT, if you don't have your UK VAT number on the consignment. And then number two is then once the goods do arrive, and HMRC will be reconciling it through to your VAT return. So if you're not making a declaration there, then you'll have a problem. So basically your goods will get stopped. The second thing is your customer will not be able to get the goods until they've been notified by customs that the goods have arrived. So they're going to have to come and pay VAT there. And there's a good chance, if you have charged them correctly VAT in the checkout, if you haven't declared it properly to customs, then customs will try and charge your customer VAT again. So they'll get double whammy. So there's a real double taxation problem here, which obviously will curb your repeat business for you. So as I say, this is one that you can't ignore. Cross your fingers and toes on and hope that HMRC don't spot you transgressing the rules.
Absolutely. So obviously this is a lot to be dealing with. So Neil, I'll start with you. What is your advice now in terms of preparing your actual online store and shopping experience to deal with these changes?
So it depends upon where you are, whether you're a UK brand going into Europe or a European, or in fact outside of Europe brand coming into the UK. So where Globally get involved here is because actually in our model, we become the merchant of record on export for a brand shipping out of whatever their home country is. That means that we take on the liability for managing this new VAT process for the brands. So we cover that. But what it means is then that we work with the brands to decide what they want to do. Now, by far, realistically, there are, let's take it in both ways. There are effectively 4 different changes, as far as we can see, that have a cost impact. One is VAT, although theoretically VAT isn't a different cost; it's just a different way of managing it now. And it's who's going to pay it and how. But where you do have additional costs then is if the shipment's over that magic 135, then pounds or 150 euros, then there are duties, and how is that going to be managed? Secondly, all of the carriers are going to start charging you for the duty clearance fee as well, which often gets missed, and it's anywhere between £5 and £16. And additionally, carriers are taking the opportunity to put the prices up. So because they've got increased costs of managing clearance, etc., and they're passing that on. So effectively, then as a brand, you've got to work out how you're going to manage the VAT part, and then secondly, do you have orders over the threshold for duties and taxes? If so, what is the duty rate? What are you going to do with those additional 2 carrier charges? One, the clearance fee, and the additional cost. And the most common thing that we're doing with our brands at the moment is building that cost into the product price. Because if you try to have an experience where a European customer buying from a UK brand, or vice versa, suddenly has to start paying duty or clearance fees on arrival to the carrier, it's going to massively hurt the user experience. And often there'll be a much higher chance of return. The customer will go, the EU customer who suddenly buys something on a UK website for £120, so there's no tax even, but still gets hit with £30 or £40 of clearance costs and VAT on arrival, is likely to go, no, I don't want it, take it back, which they're in their rights to do. At that point, the brand is going to get lumped with that cost from the carrier. They're still going to try and charge it back. Plus, you have to return it back into the UK. which means you've got to make sure that the clearances on its way back into the UK are eligible for returns goods relief, so you don't get duty on the way back in. So the by far the most common approach from the brands we're working with is to build it into the product price, make it very clear during the user journey that don't worry, post-Brexit, duties and taxes are taken care of, and we're covering it for you. And it's much better to put the price of the product up by 10 or 15% and have it fully inclusive than to let your customer have that shock on arrival that they won't be expecting. No matter what they know about Brexit, they still won't really know until it hits them on the face when the courier rocks up and wants money. Here's your parcel, give me the money, otherwise you don't get it. That kind of experience.
Absolutely. So I think, Richard, you're obviously dealing with big brands and big e-commerce business. So Kunle, I'm wondering how this is meeting kind of those medium-sized e-commerce businesses that you're working with. How are they preparing to adjust their stores and I guess update their customers about this experience?
So many of the mid-sized companies, I've advised many of the mid-sized companies to actually make this a very seamless experience for customers, so customers do not actually notice what is going on. So updates and prices, also updating the fact visibility in the VAT in the VAT at checkout to be very, very important moving forward. Another very important thing mid-sized companies should be doing is how are we going to get logistics warehousing in the UK and in the EU, so that, especially given the fact that for many, the UK is the third biggest e-commerce market in the world, and you cannot just ignore the fact that there are about 400 million consumers in the EU. So if you're doing 40% of international sales in the UK, now is the time to actually get a third party, a 3PL web warehouse to actually store your goods in the UK, to make it very similar. So you take care of the duties up front. And there's that seamless experience for users from a customer experience standpoint, especially with returns. Also, it'd be much cheaper to have a UK return center for your UK customers. So it's really assessing what volume of business are we doing in the UK versus the EU, and then allocating the right resources from a supply chain standpoint to ensure that customer experience is seamless. You really do not want to get customers involved in all of what you're doing on the background. It has to still be seamless in order to lock in continuous repeat business. The worst thing to happen for any consumer, the worst experience you can have as a consumer, is going into a store, purchasing, rather, going to a website, purchasing, and then you have the expectation that in a few days you're going to get your product, but you need to get to the post office to pay, or to pay essentially, to Royal Mail to pay for taxes, for unseen taxes, and then you get a bit upset. It could trigger returns, and it would certainly put a hold on return purchase, which is very important to mid-sized retailers looking to accelerate growth. So it's really important to really figure out, to backtrack and just see what sorts of sales you're doing. How important is the UK? How important is the EU? And then backtrack it from an operational standpoint, and just ensuring that you have the right back end in terms of like 3PL and stock in those countries.
Yeah, so I think what I'm hearing, Neil and Kunle, from both of you really is think about the pricing as much as you can, price those costs into the actual sale, so that for consumers it's more seamless and they're not having to figure out this stuff themselves. And then also think about like the logistics of this, right? So you're both talking about these warehousing solutions. Think about where the goods are going. Are they going into the UK or out of the UK? And then where are you kind of keeping that inventory stock, so you're prepaying a lot of those fees on behalf of your customers? I'm going to circle back for a second to Richard, just so that we wrap up this tax issue and the VAT issue. So, Richard, any final advice there in terms of the website and how you're dealing with those taxes and automating them?
Yeah, just to echo a couple of things Kunle and Neil said about transparency. You're actually obliged now post Brexit to do that in the checkout. So, for example, you're going to have to show UK VAT, the import UK VAT that we touched on in the checkout, and include it in a sales invoice. In terms of your question, you know, what should people be thinking about? There's basic 4 or 5 things that we can share with you after this webinar. Think about an EORE number. If you don't know what one of those is, then you better learn very quickly, because your goods, let me tell you, are going nowhere after the 31st of December. Think about, have you got those VAT registrations in territories? Again, it's very simple online, and we've got lots of resources that we can share with you to check whether you need one or whether you don't, what the conditions are, so you can come up with a proper evaluation. Think about the tariffs and the customs declarations. You're going to, for the first time, you're going to learn about your commodity code. You're going to have to give one of those to all of your products because you'll need those on your customs declarations. Again, you won't get through customs without that kind of information. You should have a customs agent by now who will help you with all that basic paperwork. And lastly, possibly most importantly, make sure all the people you're dealing with, so your freight forwarder, for example, make sure they're prepared for all of this. Sometimes you'd be surprised how much they're not. We're seeing a lot of difficulties from very, very experienced big brand freight forwarders who are struggling with all the information they need to ask you. So best thing is that you find out for yourself what you need, and you make sure you're ready when they come knocking on your door, demanding all this kind of information, just to keep the goods. Because as I said at the beginning, there will be some practical leeway, we suspect, for the first few months. For example, you won't need to prepare UK entry customs declarations for the goods coming in. I suppose just if I may divert just a little bit, you know, listening to all of this, it sounds like Brexit's not a great idea, and you know, certainly from e-commerce point of view, it's not got a lot of upside, but it is worth looking for that. You all, as I said at the beginning, you're all having to learn about my world, and I suspect you don't find VAT and customs as entertaining as fun as I do. However, don't let this go by, this mountain that you've had to climb. Turn it into an opportunity, and think about the rest of the world. You're now learning how to cope with customs and VAT and import taxes. There's a lot of the rest of the world out there that you probably haven't thought about, that you'll now be equipped and educated and experienced on how to deal with selling into, based on what you're learning from the EU. So that we're seeing our smartest customers actually thinking about their strategies beyond Europe, often for the first time. I mentioned in the UK, we think it's about 250,000 businesses have never sold abroad except for the EU, and certainly 50,000 of them are e-commerce businesses. So keep that in mind. Think about the US. US is a tough market to break into for e-commerce. You know, they taught us everything there is to learn. But think about places like Australia and the Middle East. There's lots of opportunities there based on what you're learning right now.
I think that's excellent advice. I love it, Richard. Just leveraging what you're building and learning here anyway to ultimately grow your business and expand to other relevant markets. I want to circle around a little bit to more of the logistics side and the management side. So, Neil, I'll start with you for a second. Obviously, many international e-commerce businesses have teams around the world or across Europe. So what are your thoughts on what happens when visa requirements are up? What are the challenges now for retailers who've freely hired employees from other Eurozone countries? You know, what are the impacts that you're seeing there?
That's going to be an interesting one. I mean, and a lot will depend upon whether there's some kind of last minute deal that comes along with the tariffs and trade that reflects on visa workings. Yeah, I think it's going to be a pain, because I mean there are a lot of highly qualified EU workers, and in fact, maybe more relevant, highly experienced EU workers in e-commerce. And it will be difficult if the more difficult it is for that labour to move freely across the channel, the more difficult it is. On the other side, there are plenty of highly talented people in the UK, and we will just have to manage with it. And the same for the UK, for the EU with UK employees. But I don't see that being a barrier specifically to e-commerce brands being able to grow effectively. There is a big enough pool of resource and talent in both the UK and the EU to get through that. There are far bigger things we need to worry about. It would be my perspective on that right now.
I hear you. So Kunle, how are you seeing that issue affecting the businesses in your community?
Okay, so if you look at the DNA of most like mid-sized e-commerce businesses, from a technology standpoint, they would either have an agency build out their website, they're on a platform, so there's hardly any R&D, involved. Now, the EU, with the new recruitment, there's going to be like a point-based system, and there's going to be more preference to highly skilled workers from the EU, and in e-commerce, if we were in the SaaS space, then there might be more of a problem. But in e-commerce, we will not see too much, of an issue, because from a UK perspective, there's sufficient talent, in a way, to a degree. But here are things you should do. You should definitely, if you have EU nationals in your company, you should definitely have them apply for the EU settlement scheme. It is very simple, and I don't know how complicated it's going to get by the 1st of January. But for now, it is very easy to apply, and it's almost automatic for any EU citizen that works in the UK right now. So, get that rain check done to ensure that they all have their settlement scheme in place. And the other thing you might start to think about would be sponsorship. So if you're looking to hire from 2021, you may need to be a sponsor to an EU employee, which will cost you a bit more from a recruitment standpoint. So there'll be application fees, and there would be a bit more red tape. So you'd need to fill out forms. But I think on the whole, it would likely be simpler than, other countries outside of the EU. But let's wait and see. I think from my perspective, all of this will be very difficult in January, February, but over time, things would start to shape up, and things, should be easier. We face an uphill battle now, but over time it should, hopefully play too.
Right. So obviously there's a lot on every e-commerce business's plate right now, a lot to think about, a lot to prepare for. I want to flip the question a little bit and ask you guys your thoughts on the impact on shoppers. So Richard, I'll start with you. Your opinion on whether shoppers will prefer to shop more with domestic e-tailers in a bid to avoid paying taxes and customs charges. How do you see this kind of impacting the UK shopper?
I think the first barrier there, though, interestingly, it won't be so much the shopper. It will be the marketplaces regulating the business terms of UK e-commerce. So as I already touched upon, the marketplaces are already changing the business models of UK e-commerce and EU e-commerce businesses selling to UK consumers by forcing them to move their goods across border. Now, what that does mean is, irrespective of whether there's a trade deal, this is a very important point, which I think I've not seen anywhere, but irrespective if there's a trade deal, for most e-commerce sellers, there will be tariffs. And that's because most of the goods originate from outside of the EU or outside of the UK. So under what's and now we're delving into the real nitty gritty, the rules of origin. If the goods clearly come from China or elsewhere, then you'll still be subject to tariffs, no matter what comes out of the deal. Now, so the marketplaces, they're all over this. They don't want a bad user experience on their platforms. So they're being the police force of Brexit, and I think the tax authorities on both sides of the English Channel are delighted about this, because they're seeing a lot of the work of enforcement on proper charging of tariffs, paperwork, VAT, everything that we've already been talked about, being driven through by the marketplaces. So what, just sum that up, what that means is there will be a filter immediately, meaning that UK sellers in particular trying to continue to do business over in Europe, they're going to have to up their game immediately. They won't be allowed to take any shortcuts, or they'll just simply be blocked from the major marketplaces. So that does leave them scope to cut corners in some of the ways. I think particularly that Neil was talking about making sure that you've thought through the delivery and the returns as well. If you're not doing that on marketplaces, if you're doing it on your own website, you're cutting corners. You'll be probably spotted almost immediately. Most savvy sellers know what to look like, and even if they don't, they won't be coming back to you for repeat business. So in short, it's either you'll be stopped by a marketplace from ignoring everything that's going on, everything that's going to happen to us all in 3 weeks' time, or you're going to learn the hard way, and you'll soon adapt by February, let's see, or you'll be out of business in terms of cross-border trade.
So, Kunle, how do you see this impacting the UK consumer, and how are the businesses you're working with preparing for their customers?
The UK, so so from a grand scale, so if you look at it from a broad perspective, if customer experience, cross-border customer experience for UK customers is disrupted, 1 out of 3 times, the motivation of UK shoppers to shop internationally would be diminished, essentially, long term. Now, the clients I work with are preparing, themselves. They've registered for VAT accounts, in the UK, and they're sorting out the duties and taxation and all the legal parts of it. The big question is, if you look at it from a broader perspective, how many retailers, what portion of international retailers, especially the ones based in the EU and outside the EU, are prepared for the changes that are about to come? And that question would probably be revealed by January. The last time a review was checked, I think they said about 40% of UK retailers were not prepared as of July, I think, for Brexit and the implications of a deal or no deal. So we'll see how things pan out. But here's the thing, right? Amazon accounts for 30% of all e-commerce sales in the UK at the moment. With Amazon and eBay, it's about 40%. Amazon has a clear roadmap for its third-party sellers, and it's asked all its third-party sellers that sell in the UK and the EU at the moment to split out their inventory because it wants to be compliant. Now, if you're dealing with multiple SKUs and multiple inventories, it gets really complicated. But with fewer SKUs, you're able to say, okay, when a consignment comes in from China, we're going to have to split it. So it never really has to come to a single port. Rather, it should go to Hamburg, for instance, and then one will come to Southampton here, and you sort yourselves out. But the marketplaces, as Richard alluded to, are setting a benchmark here. And what may happen is, from a compliance standpoint, it might mean more marketplace expansion. So more UK shoppers might want to shop in marketplaces because customer experience is unaltered. Essentially, they wouldn't really see a thing or notice a thing. But given the fact that e-commerce as a whole, cross-border e-commerce, is decentralized, we're obviously going to see inconsistencies with customer experience. But at the higher end of the scale, I would think the teams are really working to get in compliance in general. Unfortunately, in the small and medium size, I do not really see mass adoption, or I think a lot of people are sitting tight and waiting to see how things pan out, which might mean they lose business and the marketplaces actually, take a lot of, market share.
Right. So Neil, I think you're probably looking at it at the other end of the spectrum, but when you're working with these big brands who are doing obviously very big business and have a lot of their own direct customers, how are they looking at things in terms of the impact to the UK consumer and preparing for that?
Well, I could try and bring a bit more optimism, because it's such all we've done is pile on the pain, I think, this morning, about telling people how difficult it is and all the challenges there are. And I think it's right, and it's important to be aware of that. But actually, I think the opportunity for brands to pick up on what Richard said is that it's a big world out there, and actually become better at what they do overall. It means there's quite a good upside here. So I agree with what Kunle was saying, that unprepared brands, particularly small to medium ones that don't have the capacity or the resource to manage it effectively, potentially can lose out to marketplaces. And the problem with that is, of course, that you're going to have to hold stock in two places. You've got to double your inventory, which means doubling your investment in capex, in capital expenditure, more obsolete stock, etc. And you lose control of the customer if it gets sold through a marketplace. So what the brands that we're working with are, and we work with brands of all sizes, by the way, from small startup, no business brands up to the big high street ones. And actually, what we're going to see, I don't think we're going to see an across the board change. I think we're going to see big winners and big losers, because the bit we haven't necessarily talked about here is coronavirus, and the fact that over the last 6 months there was already a trend for consumers around the world to buy more cross-border online. And coronavirus has compacted probably 3, 4, 5 years of that trend into 6 months. And now everybody is buying online. And whilst we talk about if it gets much more difficult with tax and duty to buy cross-border, people won't do it. Actually, it's going to be the brands that don't manage that on behalf of their customers. So what Kunle was saying about the seamless experience. If you give your customer a seamless experience, the only difference post-Brexit is going to be how you absorb the additional charges. And they're not actually necessarily that much if it's managed properly. So effectively, if brands of all sizes, no matter how big or how small you are, if you manage the situation properly, your customer will get a seamless experience. They might end up, if you pass all of the costs on, if it's below the cost of the 135, maybe on average it'll be a 7 or 8% increase in costs. So there'll be an increase in that. But then if you manage that through the pricing properly, I think actually the sales will be okay. Remember, selling now from the UK to Europe is no different to selling from the UK to Australia or the UK to America, and many brands are doing brilliantly at that. And we've seen across 500 brands that the rate of growth outside the EU is twice the rate of growth inside the EU. So there's a big market out there around the world to buy goods. So the question is not will people buy less? It's the fact that people are now used to buying online more. The more they're used to buying online, the more fickle they'll get about who they buy from, because it's breaking through the barrier of my mum, who would never buy anything online, who now is buying everything online. Now she's going, well, I'll just buy from anywhere, and the brand loyalty is much more fickle. So what we are seeing is that a lot of brands are nervous about this. They spend a lot of money acquiring customers who are then much more transient. The loyalty is harder to regain because they can go, well, I'll look here one day, I'll look there somewhere else, and they'll move around. So I think the important thing is for brands to realize that whilst it's complicated, it doesn't mean you can't sell cross-border. And even go back to Richard's point right back at the beginning about some big brands going, well, I'm not going to do some of the smaller European countries because it's just too difficult for the VAT filing. We're hearing that too. But that's why, solutions like Globally, and there are others as well, but working with brands who can manage that on your behalf means you don't have to worry too much. So I think I think there'll be big winners and big losers. I think brands that work out how to do it properly, embrace the fact that it's going to be difficult, but bring that difficulty in-house, don't let the consumer see it, will benefit. And the consumer around Europe will migrate to those brands as opposed to the ones that go, I don't know, you'll just have to work it out yourself. And what you'll see is that although there's been a huge swing to online sales, particularly cross-border over the last 6 months, you'll see some brands falling off and other brands doing really well. I mean, you just got to look at John Lewis, who decided they're not going to do international. You know, those kind of things are very unusual decisions, born by I think a concern about the difficulty rather than an embracing of the opportunity.
Right. So I think you're absolutely right. 2020 has been a crazy year worldwide in terms of dealing with the pandemic and COVID and the impact that that's had on every aspect of life, and certainly on the way that businesses go about selling and how shoppers buy. But I think building off of that, businesses have had to adapt and reinvent so much this year. And really, at the end of the day, the businesses that survive, and certainly the businesses that thrive, have been those who've been able to do those adaptations and figure out how they still give great customer service and a great customer experience despite the challenges. So, you want to dig deep and figure out how you adjust to these coming challenges and prepare for the coming changes. But I think, all of our panelists have said how you can see the opportunity here and ultimately see growth in the longer term. So before we wrap up today, I would first like to say that Richard and Avalara have very kindly decided to bring a great offer to all of our Wix users. So right about now, the team's going to be dropping a link in the chat to you to please go and join our e-commerce Facebook group. And once you've joined that group, you'll be able to get access to this offer that, Richard, I will allow you to please describe.
Yes. Well, you've had a lot of problems and issues for you to worry about. So one small thing that we'd like to help out on at Avalara is we're offering with Wix a 10% discount on our VAT compliance service. And that helps with some of the things we talked about, the extra VAT registrations you may need. So maybe it will help you continue to sell in the countries that John Lewis has abandoned. So there's an opportunity straight away there from that Neil's tipped us all off to. But the best part of that service, I always think, is there's a bunch of VAT and customs experts at the end of the phone, and they're always delighted to give free on the spot guidance, depending on your business model and on how you may be affected by all of this. And if you do need VAT help, then we're certainly there to give you. So it's good news there. And just to re-add, I think what I've taken away from today, I've really enjoyed listening to Kunle and Neil, is that actually, you've all learned about the horrors of VAT and customs, the stuff that I've embraced for 20 or 30 years and enjoyed, and you're having to get to know it and love it the way I do. But I think it was Neil who said it, is, if you learn it, because you can count on many of your competitors not learning it, then turn it into a competitive advantage, if you like, to keep going and to thrive and prosper with all of that.
Right, that's great advice. Thank you, Richard. So please, everybody, go to the Facebook group, leave some feedback on today's session, and the team there will share the discount with you. We'll also be sharing in the chat links to both Kunle and Neil's websites. So if you want to get further assistance from either of them, you'll be able to do that and check out their services. So I'd like to ask each of you to just share, I guess, your final bit of advice or words of wisdom for our audience today, as we leave them to go and get prepared for the upcoming changes. So Neil, please.
I'll be cheeky and have two things, if that's okay. One is going to be a warning, right? One thing that brands have not thought about, and I would recommend you do, is bear in mind the 1st of January transition date is about when shipments get cleared, not when they get sold. Be very careful about what you're going to do about goods get sold on the 27th, 28th of December, pre-transition, that get delivered on the 4th of January, post-transition. So whatever you're thinking of doing, think about bringing it forward a few days rather than doing it from the 1st of January. And if you want more information, then speak to me and let me know. We'll have a chat about it. But in terms of the overall bit of information, is treat this as an opportunity. But don't bury your head in the sand. Get the advice. There are people out there like the three of us on this call and other people who can help you with the information that you need to make this a success and an opportunity, not just a pain. But don't be a brand that buries your head in the sand and goes, I'll worry about it in mid-January when everything's clear and we'll see what happens then. Because I think by then you might already be in a bit of a quagmire. So reach out and get the advice from people who can give you some tips and views and hit it head on.
Thank you. Kunle.
Okay, so I'm going to take another view from more a marketing and a user experience standpoint. Okay, so this is very complex. What's about to happen? There's an opportunity, as Neil and Richard have said, there is clearly a competitive advantage for e-commerce businesses that are currently operating in the EU and the UK, selling to EU to UK customers, and making business off of it. Now, if it's too complex, think about your shopping experience for international, for UK shoppers. If you sell to UK shoppers, you may want to streamline what they see. So you may want to look at your on-site merchandising from another perspective by offering products that you think will work better from an operational standpoint and slowly expand. So really think about the customer experience and what's on offer, and your on-site experience. What products what products can work now from an AOV standpoint. I was speaking to a merchant a few weeks ago, and he was like, with our low £30 or less products, it really wouldn't work operationally. If we were to make massive adjustments, and just due to the price sensitivity, it wouldn't really work. So you might want to just streamline the products you're offering to the UK market, and also let that match with historic data essentially, or backtrack and look at your top 10 or 20% products being sold in the UK if you're international, if you're an EU business, and vice versa, and ensure that there's compliance, that those would be sorted. Those would come to market. So if it's like a logistical challenge, ensure that they're local, and just work with the data essentially.
Excellent advice. Thank you, Kunle. I always love digging into the analytics and looking at really what your business is telling you, what your customers are telling you. So I think that's a really excellent place to start. So, Richard, as our favorite taxman, we would like to let you have the final say.
Yeah, it hardly seems fair to spoil what's been a really interesting webinar about e-commerce by leaving everybody's head stuffed full of a bunch of tax acronyms. So I'll try and keep it to a minimum. Just think about the couple of things I talked about at the beginning, moving your goods. So think about the customs. You're going to need that EORE number. That's Brexit 101. Everyone you'll talk to, that's their top of the list for their checklist. Think about those customs declarations. How are you going to get them done? Do you need a commodity code? So that'll get your goods moving and make sure they don't get interrupted or stopped at the border. Then on the VAT side, just check off your countries. Are you going to need an extra VAT registration to keep selling there? If you don't have it in time, you may get by, but there's a good chance you'll get caught out by the authorities. And you're going to be paying import VAT as well. So pick the countries that you're importing to very, very carefully if you're moving goods from the UK. Think about the Netherlands, think about Belgium. They're great places to bring your goods into, and then you can break them up and ship them around the rest of the EU. And it feels like a near EU experience again, and the costs are pretty minimal. Follow up with our teams at Avalara afterwards. Most of all, don't panic. Whilst we've had 4 years to prepare for it, most people just haven't prepared for it. You've still got the best part of a couple of weeks. You can get most of these things done, so there's limited interruptions, and the VAT costs won't be too drastic if you haven't done anything yet. So just don't panic. That's my last message on that one.
Thank you so much to all of you for joining us today and sharing your great advice with all of our users. We will be sharing now in the chat links again to all of the resources that you'll be needing. Feel free to just Google Wix eCommerce School if you're looking for these resources. They'll all be available to you there. So in summary, be prepared, focus on your customer experience, look for the growth opportunity. We wish you all the best of luck and happy holidays. And we will follow up with you in a few months' time, hopefully invite these gentlemen back with some additional advice as we progress through the Brexit changes.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you. Nice meeting you all.